Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another cruiser chat with OTRAMM. Sorry for bailing early last week. My wife got stuck in the snow coming home from work, and I thought I was going to have to go get her, but it turned out where she was stuck, cars were piled up in the road in front of her and behind her. So there was no way for me to go get her. Her boss was closer and came and scooped her up, and she stayed closer to work. But yeah, I ended up jumping off of here early last week. How's it going? But yeah, no super awesome updates, no format for tonight, just whatever question you guys have. I've just been working on finishing up the latest batch of stainless exhaust. What's up, Dave? And finished up the first batch of 1FZ crank holding tools, and those sold out last week. And I should have another batch here, maybe at the end of this week, early next week, depending on how quick the water jet guys get them to me. So that's kind of exciting. We've got our first tool to sell. But yeah, crazy weather here in Virginia. It was in single digits last week, and I think it was upper 60s or low 70s today. So crazy weather, but it was nice to have all the doors open. Oh, mysterious sounds, the bane of my existence. What's happening, Devil Dog Trucker? Yeah, mysterious sounds are so hard to figure out without actually seeing and hearing. Yeah, see, it was cold, but it wasn't as bad as you guys. Yeah. Wow, and all the way from Australia. Hey, how's it going, Glenn? How's it going? Man, all kinds of crazy people tuning in tonight. See what happens when I leave early the week before? But yeah, it was nice out today. We had all the shop doors open, which was nice to let the shop air out. It would have been nicer if it was that warm for Capital Land Cruiser Tech Day. 90-degree turn, straighten the wheel, begin accelerating, wheel speed, grinding noise 3 to 4 times, then all quiet. Hey Dave, I'd check your wheel bearings. I'm wondering if I'm going brain dead. The wheel hub's not shifting a bit in the tight turn and dragging a brake pad or brake rotor. And then, once you're going straight, it evens itself back out. To answer Logan's, what do wheel bearings sound like when they're going out? Usually it's a low, grumbly, like, whoa, 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 whoa. And they'll change sound depending on which direction you're turning. Like if you do some slalom turns or sweeper turns, the wheel bearings will change sound usually. And ghost sound under passenger's side. Yeah, I don't know. Usually those are exhaust heat shields over there. Yeah, Dave, if the wah, wah, wah is your sound, then I would check your wheel bearings. Which, if they were bad, I'm surprised you didn't feel it taking the tire on and off when you did your power steering pump. But I guess if you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't have looked for it. Oh, driver's side. Random noise on a driver's side. That's a good question. It'd pretty much be drivetrain related, uh, wheel bearing, Burfield joint, something like that. There's not a lot else over there moving. Tips for bleeding brakes on an 80 series. Bleed them some more. And when you think you've finished bleeding them, bleed them 3 more times. There's not much magic to it. We use a pressure bleeder. That helps. But, start at the proportioning valve, bleed them. Sometimes it helps to bleed them, find a gravel parking lot, jam on the brakes, get the ABS to activate, and then bleed them again. But yeah, there's no real magic to it. It's just it takes way more bleeding than you think it's going to. And to Glenn, how often should the swivel hub bearings in an 80 be changed? I'm assuming you're talking about the knuckle bearings. We change them when we go in for leaking knuckles. Usually the inner axle seal blows and waters down the knuckle grease. And, we end up going and do the inner axle seal and changing all the felts and wipers. We do the knuckle bearings at the same time. I don't know that there's like a real mileage, because it depends on how hard you beat the truck. Some of them, not being really driven hard, go, 100,000 miles, and then some of them 20,000. It just depends on how you treat it. And to Dave, if you got to do the hubs apart, if you need a knuckle rebuild, if you're already taking the hubs apart, then would be the time to do it. If your knuckles aren't leaking, I would just do the hubs, the wheel bearings and hubs, and not worry about the knuckles. I can't recall having driven an improperly adjusted LSPV. I can't really see that causing squishy brakes, but I guess anything's possible. Usually we find it being air in the system, and it takes forever to bleed the air out. And then we've had 80s come in with squishy brakes. You replace everything from master cylinder, brake lines, calipers, everything, and they still have squishy brakes. So it just seems like some of them just have squishy brakes. So yeah, Dave, if yours are dry, I wouldn't mess with the knuckles. I'd just do the wheel bearings if those are indeed loose. Just found out LX450 has remote start. Is it, I guess remote start would be aftermarket any case, because I don't think Toyota ever did factory remote start. Without having the remote for it, a lot of times when they do the remote start installs, they'll put a sticker under the hood that says, like, warning, this vehicle equipped with remote start, blah, 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 blah. I'd check and see if there's like a name brand on that, if there's that sticker and if there's a name brand on it. Otherwise, you're going to have to go rooting around up under the dash and find the remote start like box and see who the manufacturer was and call them and see if they can match up a remote for you. And yeah, good point, Nigel. Stainless lines seem to help with squishy brakes. Although we've had some we've put stainless lines on and they're still squishy. It's just baffling. Like, the only thing we've gone through and haven't replaced on the squishy ones is the ABS block. Yeah, if they felt better before replacing the hoses and everything, I would try bleeding them some more. I mean, I would imagine we probably bleed a gallon or so through them when we do them. Um, and a lot of times we're probably bleeding them more than they need to be bled, but they're so hard to get to bleed out. We normally just, we push like a gallon through. The power bleeder definitely helps. Awesome. Yeah, I still say you're a brave man, Alexi, driving that thing all over creation after just getting it put back together after being in a barn. But it's awesome that it's running well. What's considered normal oil use in a 450 per say 1,000 miles? Um, those engines are the vintage that you shouldn't have a ton of oil consumption. Like new guidelines with the new low tension rings and all that jazz is a quart per 1,000 miles on a lot of vehicles, um, which is high on the 4.5. We normally see like a quart over an oil change period of like 3,000 miles on those. So not a ton. Um, do I know anybody that specializes in Land Cruisers in North Carolina or South Carolina? Troll Hole is in South Carolina, but I'm not sure where. And I feel like there's a shop like Apex Overland or something. I think they're in North Carolina, but I'm not entirely certain what they do. But I've seen 80 series stuff from them on Instagram. But Troll Hole in South Carolina knows cruisers. Um, and yeah, a gallon is a lot, but the fluid's cheap and it's easier to just keep bleeding. But yeah, we usually start at the LSPV and then, yeah, right rear, right left, front left. That sounds right. Basically, you go from the furthest away or the longest brake line run to the shortest. And to George, is Old Man Emu the only suspension upgrade for the 60 series? Old Man Emu's the most easily accessible. There's others. I think Terrain Tamer has one. I know I've seen others. I don't know. I don't know if Tough Dog does leaf springs, but maybe. Yeah, Old Man Emu is the most common, but I know there's others out there. Old Man Emu's what we usually stick on them just because they're easy to get and they're decent springs. And Alexi's got an intermittent clutch problem, hard to go into first, and sometimes it slips accelerating in second and fourth. The clutch pedal and slave rod may need to be readjusted. Sometimes after you put new ones on, they'll jam into the fork some more, and you'll lose some of the adjustment, and we'll have to go back and readjust them. So that's the first thing I would look at. And to Glenn, is it safe to put a turbo on a 100,000 mile 1HZ motor? I honestly have no idea. We never got the diesel motors here, so it's very few and far between that I see them. And we never got anything that was turbocharged. So I've never really played with turbos other than the one that was on my Supra from the factory, and I didn't tweak on that much. So I unfortunately don't have much background with the 1HZ or with turbos. Yeah, now I remember Logan's weird noise with the brake booster check valve. Wits End just put out a kit that's like the hose, the check valve, everything for the 80 series, like all in one shebang. So that'd probably be the easiest way to get that if you think you've got a brake booster check valve weird noise. I really like the Slinky Stage 1 slash Icon. I haven't driven an Old Man Emu. You know what? I have driven an Old Man Emu with Fox shocks, but I haven't driven one much. So I don't have a really good impression of it. I put Foxes on an Old Man Emu lifted truck a couple of years ago, but it was at the shop for such a short period of time, I didn't really get to drive it. The Slinky stuff is awesome, and that's what I'm really looking towards putting on my 80. I just need to come up with the funds to buy the Slinky kit. We've done a couple of them at the shop, and they just ride fantastic. I mean, the Old Man Emu stuff rides nice as well. Yeah, and the Fox, for the little bit I drove them around the parking lot, they rode nice, but I haven't really driven them on the road or anything. We got attack dogs going crazy. Everybody's coming home from work in the neighborhood. But yeah, I really, really like the Slinky stuff. So what do drive shaft U-joints sound like? They can sound like everything from like a grumbly, rumbly like a wheel bearing to like a popping sound to a high-pitched squeal. They're hard to narrow down. And usually to like definitively diagnose one, if we can't actually feel slop in them, we'll pump new grease into them and see if the sound changes. And if the sound changes, then you know it's a U-joint needle bearing. And yeah, like Logan said, Molly grease, it'll be like dark gray or black with the Molly in it. I guess technically Molly is an EP grease, but there's EP greases without Molly, if that makes sense. And I don't know what's available in Australia, but here at the local stores, you can get Valvoline, and it's labeled Valvoline Ford Lincoln Mercury CV grease, and it's high Molly. And yeah, Dave, drive shafts can also make a grinding sound. I know there is a Schaefer's Molly. I don't know the part number on it. We don't have anybody that supplies them locally. So we usually get either the Valvoline or Mag 1's got a heavy Molly grease. Liqua Molly has a really nice Molly grease. But my supplier moved away, so I don't have the hookup for that anymore. But if you've got Liqua Molly in Australia, the Liqua Molly grease, I think it's called Langzite Fett, is really nice. I'm trying to think if there's any others we've seen. And I've also used the factory Toyota Molly grease. It's probably the nicest molly grease I've ever used, but it's really hard to come by and really expensive. Cool. And to Logan that can't find sounds, uh, if it's really driving you nuts, there's a company called Steelman, and they make something called chassis ears. And the wired version of it is reasonably cheap. They're little microphones you clamp all over underneath with like a mixer and headphones, and you flip channels until you find the microphone that's making the noise. And it's a real quick, easy way to narrow down where the sounds are coming from. And to Dave, we're using Scat Speed Bead. It's a combo of aluminum oxide and glass beads. So it's got the fast cutting of the aluminum oxide, but it leaves the smooth satin finish from the glass beads. And I actually need to order more because ours is worn out. And to Alexi, yes, we can get just the springs and other ancillary items for your 40. When you order the All Man Emu stuff, it all is piecemeal to order it. Because it's not a kit when we order it. I have to order each part number by itself. To Glenn, whose radiator is 26 years old, with no overheating problems, and I'm assuming no leaks. I'm of the opinion if it's not broke, don't fix it. If you don't have any leaks, if you don't have any overheating problems, and you're not planning a trip where you're, 5 hours from civilization, I'd tend to leave it alone until it's an issue. Which I don't know where in Australia you are. You might be in the outback where a radiator popping would strand you. But yeah, I tend to leave things alone until an actual problem pops up. Uh, unless you're venturing out into the boonies where a radiator could strand you. And yeah, we normally use either the Denso or the Koyo Rad, the aluminum cord ones. And they work fine. The Toyota ones are really nice, but they're double, if not triple, the cost of the aftermarket ones. Not a huge fan of the CSF or Spectre replacements, but the Denso and the Koyo Rads are both nice. Oh, my neck's all creakily. I've been welding the end of last week and all this week, and my neck's bugging me from flipping the welding helmet back and forth. Pulling the drive shafts off of an 80 to clean them and re-lube. Before you take them off, draw a line across the slip yokes on both of them. That way you get the slip yokes re-indexed properly when you put them back together, so that your U-joints aren't out of phase. I'm trying to think anything. Don't pack the slip joints slam full of grease. You can get them to hydrolock. Basically, you just kind of want to, smear a good Molly grease or, EP grease on the splines and put everything back together. But yeah, that's all I can really think of. The 14 millimeter bolts holding the drive shafts on are going to be stupidly tight. We've got like an extended length box end wrench that we use to loosen them up that is super helpful. But yeah, that's all I can really think of as far as the drive shafts. Just make sure you mark which way the slip joint goes so that it goes back in the same orientation. We see so many come in with weird driveline noises, and the U-joint phasing is just a little bit off. I don't know why we attract such weird spam messages. And a Logan, that's crazy cheap for a brass cord radiator. We usually do the steering dampers with the Old Man Emu kits. Just because it seems like the one that comes with the Old Man Emu kit is beefier, and presumably adds more dampening. And most of the time when people are putting the lifts on, they're going to bigger, heavier tires. So, extra dampening can't hurt. Yeah, so we normally do the damper at the same time. And to Logan, do drilled and slotted brakes really make that much of a difference? They do. We've run the EBCs and the terrain tamers, and the terrain tamers really do make quite a bit of difference in stopping power. The trade-off is you run through brake pads a lot faster, which I guess there's always going to be a trade-off, and it's probably worthwhile to eat brake pads faster, to be able to stop a heavy truck in a shorter distance. If you do a lot of driving in mud, like deep soupy mud, the drilled and slotteds can be a pain because the drill holes will pack up with mud. But that and the added brake wear is the only thing I can think of as a downside. I am a terrible person to ask tire opinions. We don't have a tire machine at the shop, so we don't ever do the tire install. So like people come in, we do their lift, and then they leave and somebody else puts the tires on. So I never pay attention to what tires people are running. I know a lot of people are liking the Toyos, but I've never firsthand paid attention to them, which I really need to start paying attention to tires because it seems like every week somebody asks me about tires. But yeah, it's just been one of those things we've never paid attention to. What are you eating? Trilly, stop licking the floor. Where? What do I not like about CSF radiators? I've seen fitment issues with them. I haven't actually seen any problems with them leaking or wearing out sooner. Like, it seems like once you get them installed, they last quite well. But I've seen them not fit great. Although on the 80 series, they seem to fit fine. I'm trying to think. I think it was my 60 series that it didn't. I tried to put a CSF in it, and it just did not fit well. And to Art, you can't activate the ABS on an 80 with TextStream or a Virus or anything. The ABS doesn't run through the 17-pin connector, or it doesn't run through the DLC connector under the dash. The ABS is accessed through I think in Snap-on speak, it's Toy 2. It's the underhood connector with just a jumper connection. The old school Toyota MasterTech will plug into that and pull ABS and airbag codes. But I don't think you can activate it directly through the MasterTech. There's like a second box that goes in line that's called like the ABS checker or something like that. I've never actually seen one in person or used them. I've just seen reference to it. But yeah, that's why we just find a gravel parking lot and jam on the brakes to activate the ABS. And cool, Glenn. I'll catch you later. Thanks for tuning in all the way from Australia. And to Eric, Tech Day was awesome. Quite a few people showed up. It was a long day, but it was fun. I think we started about 9, and I think I left a little bit after 6. But yeah, it was a good day. Big turnout, especially for as cold as it was. Dirty off-road, have a nudging feeling on takeoff, put new trailing arm bushes, offset. I'm guessing by nudging, like you've got a little bit of slop that takes up. I would look at pinion bearings and drive shaft slip yokes. I've seen them, I've seen drive shaft slip yokes cause a little bit of like a pop and weird delay when you're starting. Same with the pinion bearings when they get real bad, because you've got to take up the slack in the bearing before you start moving. If I'm reading the question right. A video about the parts washer would be super boring. It's basically just a big dishwasher for parts. It's just, it's got a turntable inside. You load the parts into it, and it's high pressure, hot water with some kind of detergent in it that works really well. I guess we could do a video on it, but it's not very interesting. I guess motor mounts could also cause a weird delay in taking off. The motor mounts are blown out in my Subaru, and it does some weird things sometimes. Yeah, I could probably just show how it works in another vid, because we have the stupid thing on all the time. It was ungodly expensive, but man, was it worth it. I love that I can put a whole set of knuckles in it, and they're spotlessly clean in an hour. And now Alexi wants a video on the new lathe. I think, and I hope my wife is not watching this, the one we've got is about 10 grand. You can get smaller ones, I want to say for like 4 or 5. And you can find them used even cheaper. They just don't seem to pop up used here that often. Parts washer lathe combo vid, huh? I want to play with the new lathe. I got all the tooling for it, but I haven't had time to play with it and really make anything other than just test driving it. I skimmed down a 5/8 bolt so that it would fit in a 1/2-inch drill chuck for the guys next door to make some kind of adapter for something. And it was crazy how quick the new lathe just chewed a hardened 5/8 bolt down. Like, I think I took about a 1/4 of an inch off in a pass, and it didn't even care. I've got a very healthy fear of the new lathe. What's the next repair video I'm going to do? I need to do the second half of the head gasket video, and I had expected to have that done already, but we ran into a slight issue with the head on that one. It was way more warped than normal. The the head was way more warped than normal and had to get skimmed further than we normally skim them. So I had to get a thicker than stock head gasket, which works out well because the guy's planning on going forced induction. So we're going to do Cometic stainless head gasket and ARP head studs. But I'm waiting on the custom gasket and studs to come. So there's a bit of delay for that. And to Logan, yeah, I'll try to remember to show the bottom of the intake plenum. I'm assuming you mean like the VSVs and like the vacuum line plumbing and stuff under there. But yeah, we can show that. And I'm not sure what Dave's asking about the window track seal thingies. Oh, like, I'm assuming you mean putting in the window runs. If we had a truck that came in that needed window runs, I could do a video on them. And to Logan, who makes good head gaskets, 99.999% of the time, we use factory Toyota head gaskets. We use Toyota for all the gaskets that we can. This one, I'm getting a Cometic gasket because they make them in different thicknesses, and I can use the head gasket to make up for the extra material that had to be skimmed off to flatten out the head. So yeah, this one's getting a Cometic. Every other one we've ever done has gotten factory Toyota. I want to say there's two different gasket sets from Toyota. There's Valve Grind, which is the head gasket set, and then full rebuild. I want to say the Valve Grind gasket set's around 300 and full engine gaskets around 400, but I'd have to look it up to know for sure. And the overall stack up distance will be the same. The only reason I'm going with the thicker gasket is because we had to cut extra thickness off the head to get it back to flat. So if I'd put it back with the extra thickness cut off, the timing chain would have been a hair long because it's an overhead cam. So we're using a thicker gasket to compensate for the extra material that was cut off to bring the timing chain back to the right length. And there was like math involved, and the machinist did that. It just told me what sizes to order. But yeah, normal studs or head bolts. And the gasket that I'm using, I want to say it's only like 5 thousandths thicker than stock. Or maybe a little. No, it may have been 10 thousandths. It wasn't a lot thicker than stock. They made a couple different sizes, and it was the one that was just the next size up. Yeah, you would have more compression than stock, but the biggest problem, the cam is, on top of the head, and the crank's at the bottom with the timing chain. The timing chain slack is taken up on the non-drive side. So if you shorten the head height, the cam gets closer to the crank, so your timing chain gets shorter on that side, which then changes the timing of the cams in relation to the crankshaft. So you've got to use a slightly thicker gasket to put the relation of the cams back on center line. Not an issue you run into with like the older, like 2F, 3F, because the cam's in the head or in the block and it's geared together. But yeah, luckily, Cometic makes different thickness gaskets to compensate for it. We had one before that was warped more than this one was. And we ended up having to find a shop that could bake it to unwarp it and then skim it. Theoretically, you could just put a bigger gear on the cam, but when you're only talking about like 5 to 10 thousandths of an inch in height difference, it would be a whole lot of math to make a new gear. You could theoretically use an adjustable cam gear like they use on like a lot of little, racing 4-cylinders. And if you put an adjustable cam sprocket, you could adjust out the extra chain length and do it that way. But since Cometic makes the thicker gasket and the MLS gaskets are better for boosted applications anyway, we're going to go that route because the gasket's fairly cheap. Probably cheaper than a set of adjustable cam gears would be. Yeah, it's fun because being as it's a MLS gasket, I've also got to find a surface roughness comparator to borrow so that I can make sure the block deck surface is an acceptable level of smoothness for the new gasket to seal to, since the MLS gaskets don't tolerate surface roughness like the factory gaskets do. Yeah, probably it would be overkill, unless you're planning on turboing or supercharging. The Cometic gaskets are, any of the MLS gaskets, they're pickier about install. Like everything's got to be super smooth, super flat, no imperfections. And they're pickier about torque specs and things like that, which is why you don't use them unless you need them, either for turbo, boosting, stuff like that, or because you're trying to get a different thickness. For 99% of everything, the factory Toyota gasket's going to be your best bet. They're much more tolerant of install issues and surface finishes and things like that. Not to say that you should be sloppy while putting a factory gasket in, uh, but they're just less finicky. What's up, Richie? You never tune into this. And Crash misses you. He hasn't seen you in a while. That is true. But it's your YOUR''E. No, just the throttle body has to come off to get the valve cover off, and like don't jack with undoing all the throttle cables. Just take the 4 bolts and the 2 hoses off, and flop the whole shebang to the side. Yeah, I mean, for most everything, the Toyota head gasket's going to be your more reliable option. I guess not reliable. It's the easiest to get to be reliable. It doesn't take extra work. Wow, that is a lot of amps. Are you running like aught battery cables? Does it fit in the factory location? Because that's a small alternator case to be pumping 270 amps out of. Wow, that is a lot of power to be pumping out of an OEM-sized case. My my Forerunner had an extra alternator slung underneath, I think off of like a Pinto or something, that I used to run an onboard welder back in the day. That thing was sweet because I had pulled all the charge controls off of it, so it was just high frequency spinning, and it did nice. The better question is, what is Richie not doing with his truck? Yes, same grease, same Molly knuckle grease for the knuckle bearings. The knuckle bearings they're in the same hole, so they get, bathed in the knuckle grease. So you want the same grease on them so that you don't run into base stock incompatibility. So yeah, same knuckle grease for the knuckle bearings and the burr fields and to pack the knuckles. I need an extra supercharger. Can you come down and install that on my 80? I will trade you sleeping in my parking lot. Yeah, I'm half tempted to put a um, turbo kit on my truck just to see what happens at 350,000 miles. But supercharger would be probably awesome too. Crash is home currently, so he might be naked. I don't know. I can text him and find out. Yeah, I need a turbo. Yeah, the difference between a non-supercharged 1FZ and a supercharged 1FZ is pretty amazing. Squeak in the steering wheel. I've never completely pulled one of the steering columns apart, but I feel like there's a set of nylon bushings inside of the column. Uh, so that would probably be the squeak. I've also seen like the two clamshell plastic pieces that clamp onto the column. I've seen those get kind of out of whack and rub on things and also cause a squeak. And to Dave, yes, if somebody had a 1HZ, I would do that swap, although you'd probably have to get a mortgage for it. Clock spring can also squeak. If you're not experienced with dealing with airbag parts and the clock spring, I would not touch it. They're very easy to break, and it's very easy to set the airbag off while trying to mess with them if you don't do all of the shutdown procedures. When I was still doing collision repair, I had to go to airbag safety training, and they strapped one to one of those huge cafeteria like lunchroom tables and set it off, and it blew the lunchroom table back like 12 feet. Uh, Airbags are no joke, and yeah, I get sketched out every time I have to mess with them, and I've taken them apart hundreds of times, and I still don't like doing it. And awesome too, Richie. I'm glad you like the new knuckle video. Uh, yeah, I did that with the newer camera and new lighting, and it actually turned out pretty decent. What's the next video equipment I want? Um, that's a good question. Probably the next thing I'm gonna get is a nicer like home photography camera, and then I can use my nice current home photography camera at the shop. All the original videos at the shop were shot on like a Nikon point and shoot. The 80 series knuckle video and the 80 series head gasket video were shot with my Sony uh, A6000 that I use for hobby photography. So I want to get one of the new Sony 6400s, and then the 6000 can live at the shop permanently. I don't have a Manfrotto. I've got a Manfrotto little one. Yes, and that is my hobby. I've got a Rangers and a Ravelli and a Joby. Yeah, I've got so many more tripods than I ever thought I would own since I started doing videos. Yeah, I've been looking at the Manfrotto monopod. We're going to Portugal in April, and looking for something smaller and packable rather than a full-size tripod. And Richie, you're going to be disappointed. Crash is not naked. He's building cup turners for his wife. No. If it fits in a backpack and overhead, I may have to check one of those out. Yeah, I know. Crash is married and has a kid. It's crazy. By hypercharged, I'm guessing you mean turbo and super? In which case, no. The only forced induction I've done on a 1FZ is the TRD turbo kit. Or, I'm sorry, TRD supercharger kit. Yeah, I've only done the TRD supercharger by itself. I haven't done any compound charging, although that would be awesome. What, Richie, you've never heard of compound charging? You use the supercharger to spool the turbocharger faster? You get the low end grunt and the high RPM flow. I need a drone too, although I have not convinced my wife of that fact. Awesome. Glad the crank pulley tools are actually making it to people. I wasn't sure how fast they would go out being in the flat rate boxes. Yeah, the crank pulley tool I'm selling is about twice as thick as the one we've been using at the shop, so it should be pretty beefy. Ah, I'm going brain dead. They are 80 with shipping in a flat rate box. Although I am currently out of them. Well, I've technically got one at the shop, but I saved one for myself because I like the new design better than the one that I've been using. But I should have the next batch of them in either late this week, maybe sometime next week. And then I'll put them up on the website and yeah, put them up on the website. Well, they're up on the website now, but it's marked as out of stock. But I've got 10 more coming in shortly. And then once they come in, I've just got to broach the square drives into them and throw some paint on them. Oh, well, yeah, that would be why it got here there so quick. I should have paid more attention to addresses as I was doing the labels. Rear tire carrier options for stock rear bumper. I think you're only, well, you got two. There's the Summit guy on I Hate Mud that makes the kit. And there's the JDM tire carrier that bolts onto the quarter. And I'm glad Richie still likes my exhaust. I'm finishing up 2 more sets this week. I did 2 80 series and 262. And the Logan, who do I ship through? USPS, FedEx, UPS, pretty much anybody that'll come to the shop and pick things up. Long range fuel tank on a 60 series, easy to do. It was surprisingly easy. I did one a couple of weeks ago, and I probably should have done a video on it, but we were rushing to get it done, and I didn't shoot a video. But yeah, it was a lot easier than I thought. And yeah, I was gonna paint them black, and the guy at the shop next door was like, "No, dude, everything else you paint is blue. You've got to paint it blue." So yeah, it's actually the same paint that's on the shop press. Yes, and I am not a super fan of FedEx. They like to come to the shop at like 4 o'clock and mark the shop is closed and keep on driving. And yeah, I need to do more of just setting the camera up and filming and then worrying about editing later. Um, I've got a couple customers with 1FZs over 400,000. Um, I mean, I just bought one with 350 on it, and I'm not worried about it. And yeah, of all the delivery guys that come to the shop, UPS is definitely the best. He knows I'm usually waiting on parts, so he comes to us first, um, and is super awesome. I did get the little GoPro shoulder mount thing, so I could just film everything I'm working on at the shop during the day, but I've yet to get that to work really well. Yeah, I never thought I would have this much camera junk. Yeah, I appreciate everybody that's been pimping the channel. It's crazy how fast it's growing. Like we hit like 2,200 subscribers on Friday, and today we're at 2,297, which is like almost 100 people in like 3 days. Um, to Dave, the MagnaFlow pipe is your front cat. Yes, if you replace the cat, the MagnaFlow pipe is your front cat. Just get the MagnaFlow rear cat, and it's all the same, dimensionally the same as factory. I'm a skilled feller. But yeah, I appreciate all the guys that subscribe, and especially the Patreons. Uh, Dave and Richie are Patreon or patrons, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know that I'm ever going to hit 10K. That seems a really long ways away. I mean, I never thought I was going to hit 1,000 subscribers either. But yeah, 10K seems a really, really far way away. But who knows? Yeah, I do a really bad job of self-promotion, so probably most of the people on Mud don't know I exist. 35 is on an LC. So basically, the way I look at it, if you're going to go in and install lockers, re-gear it in the axles. If you're not planning on putting lockers or your truck's already locked, do the transfer case mod. The transfer case high range gears won't get you quite back to stock with 35s, but they, it's pretty close, and it's a nice setup. Yeah, if you've got factory lockers, I would do it in the transfer case. And then you don't have to worry about doing ring and pinion. Alexi, not all LC guys are odd, just you. I'm just kidding. And Nico from Toyota says hello. Apparently, you called him the other day looking for parts, and he was confused until he figured out it was you. I mean, you can re-gear lower, but I don't know that the added expense is worth it over going using the transfer case. And if you do it at the transfer case and you keep the stronger factory 410s, so yeah, with the I'm going brain dead. Too much argon today. With the added cost and the added cost of ring and pinions and the added strength of doing it in the transfer case, I would do it in the T case. I'm planning on running 35s on my 80, and I'm planning on just doing the T case gears and leaving the factory 410s in. And my Forerunners, completely opposite. It's 529s in the axles, dual cases with 470s in the back case. But for an 80, for most folks, I think you're going to get more bang for your buck out of doing it in the transfer case. Like parts wise, the transfer case gears cost more, but labor wise, the T case gears are going to end up being cheaper. And the transfer case gears just drop in and mesh. You don't have to worry about doing ring and pinion setup, so your options for installers are bigger. Oh, you can get lower high range gears for the T case now. They have overdrive and underdrive now for the 80 series and 100 series T case, and we've done them on, I don't know, quite a few 80s. I think they work out as though you had changed to a 456 is how the math works out, but I'm not quite sure. But we've got quite a few guys running them with 35s. And that's what I'm planning on mine, is to just run the underdrive transfer case gears and the lower low range transfer case gears, and leave the E-locked axles in mine alone and keep the stronger factory 410s. Because I'm planning on using the 80 as a get me to the trail, go wheeling, get me home type rig, as opposed to my Forerunner that's a trailer queen. But yeah, since they've come out with the underdrive high range gears, that is just a super awesome option. The factory 410. So when you go to lower ratios, each step of lower gear ratio, like 410 to 430 to 456 to 488, the pinion gets increasingly smaller as you go lower in the gearing. And since the pinion's going smaller, you're losing tooth contact. So, it's crazy. Like a 529 pinion is about half the diameter of a 410 pinion. So you just don't have as much strength in the gears. There's not as much mesh. That I don't know that the metallurgy on the aftermarket gears is as awesome as on the stock Toyota stuff. And if you guys don't mind, I'm going to jump off of here and go feed the dogs their dinner, because they're patiently waiting in the other room. But thanks to everybody for tuning in this week. I'll be back next week, same time, same place. Thanks again to everybody that subscribed. Extra awesome thanks to our patrons, which I realize Alexi is on here too as a patron. So I got 3 patrons on tonight, which is super awesome. That's like almost all of them. So yeah, I'll catch you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.